Hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to the latest edition of ACSA and Craft Spirits Magazine's Craft Spirits Roundtable. I'm Jeff Cioletti. I'm editor-in-chief of Craft Spirits Magazine, and I'll be your moderator today. A little about Craft Spirits Magazine. Craft Spirits Magazine is the American Craft Spirits Association's bi-monthly digital magazine and is the unparalleled resource for in-depth insight and intelligence for the entire craft spirits universe. The magazine features the information and analysis that small independent spirits producers and allied businesses need to operate in today's complex craft beverage market. Today, we're going to focus on some of those independent producers that have been leaders in the world of craft cream liqueurs. But before I introduce them, I'd like to extend a very special thanks to the sponsor of today's roundtable, Galloway Company. Galloway Company is a fourth generation family owned innovator and manufacturer of dairy based ingredients and beverage bases. Based in Neenah, Wisconsin, Galloway is the nation's largest producer of cream liqueur bases, bulk sweetened condensed milk, and a category leader in dessert mixes and acidified dairy beverages. And you can learn more at gallowaycompany.com. Now, I just have a few housekeeping items before we get started. We enthusiastically invite your questions for our panelists today. But if you have a question, please write it in the Q&A tab, and we'll try to get to all of your questions either at a natural break in the program or in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the webinar. You might notice that you've been muted on entry and your video function has been disabled. We ask that you remain on mute for the duration and communicate only through the chat function. And if you want to revisit today's program or recommend it to others, it will be archived at both AmericanCraftSpirits.com, AmericanCraftSpirits.org and CraftSpiritsMag.com in the coming days. And it will also be rebroadcast as a podcast. And now it's time to meet our panel. First up is Thomas Bard, who is co-founder, CEO, and head distiller at the Bard Distillery in Graham, Kentucky. He's also the secretary treasurer of ACSA's board of directors and is the craft chair of the board of directors of the Kentucky Distillers Association. He also happens to be the fourth great grandson of William Bard, who founded Bardstown, Kentucky. And joining Thomas is JD Recobs, co-founder and CEO of Misunderstood Brands. Based in Montclair, New Jersey, JD leads overall strategy, brand vision, and growth across the portfolio, including Misunderstood Whiskey and Outrageous, a dairy-free oat milk liqueur brand, which you'll be hearing about today. And last but not least is Scott Sanders, co-founder of Tobacco Barn Distillery in Hollywood, Maryland. In 2023, Tobacco Barn earned the Top Farmer Distiller Award in the Heartland Spirits competition. And then again in 2025, it took the Farmer Distillery Beyond Bourbon Award for its Maryland Bourbon Cream Liqueur, which you'll be hearing about. Before Scott launched Tobacco Barn with close friends Dan Dawson and Sean Coogan, he was a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy. So now Scott, JD, and Tom all can do a better job talking about their operations than I can. So I'm going to let them do it. And first, we will hear from Scott.
Sure, and great to be here, Jeff, and everybody else. Thanks for joining us today. So we're a farm distillery. I mean, we do farm to glass. That's everything we do. So we grow the corn right on site. Farm. It's called Tobacco Farm because historically in Maryland, we were a one crop economy for about 200 years. So even though we still have a tobacco farm, a barn on our farm, everybody had one. And we have one from about 1811 or 12. That's the barn that's on our bottle there. So that's where we go to. So we're very blessed. We have a great aquifer underneath our farm. So we grow the corn on site, and then we source rye from Mennonites near. Some of that doesn't all come from Maryland because they get it from all around. Rye is a kind of a different crop if people know about farming rye, and then make it all on site. So we've been around for started the business in 2014, and we've been distilling since 2015. So that's real glad to be here. I'm trying to think of, oh, we are going to do our first thing that we don't grow this year. We're going to be partnering with Bardstown Bourbon Company later this year to have a Maryland, Kentucky reunion bourbon. That's the bunch of history goes back to when Tom and Bardstown was being farmed there. A lot of Marylanders, including Basil Hayden, went out to Kentucky. So we're kind of bringing that heritage back. Back over to you, Jeff.
Awesome. It's great to have you, Scott. And let's hear from JD next.
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks for taking the time. It's great to be here. And Scott, thank you for your service, sir. It's been great to learn a little bit about what you're doing over there. Everybody, my name is JD. We started Misunderstood Brands out of our kitchen in Montclair, New Jersey. Started with my best friend who I known since I was 7 years old. We actually grew up 10 houses down the street from each other, and we're still in business, haven't killed each other yet. So we're grateful to still be here after 9 years. So we own Misunderstood Whiskey Company, which kind of takes a little bit of a different approach to the wonderful world of bourbon and American whiskey. We use all real ingredients, and we infuse our whiskeys with fresh ingredients, like I said, ginger and orange blossom honey. It's absolutely delicious, and kind of the precipice of getting into the cream liqueur, or the non-cream liqueur category, if you will, was this guy right here. Is the first and only dairy-free hard oat nog, which we launched a few years back under the Misunderstood label. That did pretty well, and so we decided to put our chips in and really lean in and have some fun with the cream liqueur category. So excited to learn from Scott and Tom, and just be part of the conversation. Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Thank you, JD. And now finally, Tom.
Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. First of all, hopefully we can tell you some stuff, little tidbits that you can take back and do something with. Our distillery's been open for about 6 years. And JD, you're talking about not killing your best friend. I run mine with my wife. So it's a miracle that we haven't killed each other yet, or mainly her killing me, because I'm the one that will probably deserve it. But it's been a lot of fun, but also very interesting 5 or 6 years to own a distillery. We opened up right before COVID hit, and then it's just been the fun little roller coaster it's been since. Um, One thing that amazes me is that when I talk to a lot of people who started up around this same amount of time frame, is that they're just like me. They're building the plane while they're flying it. So I still spend most of my days trying to just go to the next thing on my distillery, whether it's, construction work, demolition work, trying to make the equipment I've got function, try to get into a new market. It's a tough time in the best of times for a small uh, craft group to actually try to release a product and try to get it on the market and try to actually survive. So that's what I spend all my time doing. And the cream liqueurs have been a lifesaver now for about 4 or 5 years for our business, as we, are putting down whiskeys and bourbons, and waiting for them to be ready to get out of the barrel. So these have been huge for us. We're located in Western Kentucky, so and we're on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, so we have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for joining in, and hopefully we can answer some things for you.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Glad to have you. I want to start the conversation talking about processes. Uh, Pretty open-ended question. I just want to hear first from Tom, sort of a step-by-step process of how you chose the flavors for the cream liqueurs, what that sort of trial and error experimentation was like before you got it right, and also, how you scale it, how easy it is to scale, that kind of thing.
Sure. So it's real simple on choosing them. Is I'm a fan of spirits, first of all. So it was as easy as just perusing the liquor store and seeing what I like, listening to people as they come in, what they talk about. Um, and if you're in the industry, you kind of start to get a feel for either what do I love and what do I want to try my version of, what are people asking for, and then the third thing is what's not out there. So the first thing we started out with was a caramel cream liqueur, and which is fairly close to being a bourbon cream, but it's more caramel than it is bourbon because in Kentucky, especially, we have a lot of bourbon creams where that bourbon is very forward, which I love. It's fantastic. But we thought, well, I don't want to really compete with the other Kentucky versions of that. I'll never get on the shelf. So we went heavy on the caramel flavor to it. And that's been a huge hit for us. Matter of fact, that's probably still, as far as volume goes, our number one seller. Because even people who come into our distillery and love bourbon, they usually end up going away with at least a bottle or two of that. So choosing the flavors is just do what you think people want, do what you like, and do what you would like to try. The sky's the limit on this. Just play around with it, see what you think. As far as once you figure out what you're wanting to do, then contact one of the suppliers. If you're wanting to do things like a lot of us do, contact, Flavor Man, Mother Murphy's. I use Mother Murphy's personally. Call them up and tell them what you're wanting to do. And if you have an idea somehow of kind of what ingredients you think go into it, then by all means order that. But I highly recommend talking to them and saying, I would like help with the initial formulation on this because they'll come up with ingredients that you don't even know exist. Like, for example, our blackberry bourbon cream that we came out with. Uh, we found out with this one and with our blackberry whiskey is that not only is there a blackberry natural flavoring, but there's also a blackberry enhancer. Well, I would have never ordered that because I didn't know it was a thing. But it's critical. It's critical to getting that flavor and giving you an extra thing to mess with while you're formulating. So when you figure out what you want, call that company, talk to them for normally a couple $100. They will send you an initial formulation of what they think you should start with. And then once you get it, just start to play. I made all of our batches in 5-gallon buckets, just with the initial formulation that I was given by the people who make the ingredients. And then if it's like, well, that's not really suiting me, it needs more this or more that, then just start doing like you do in your kitchen. Just start playing around and doing it in a 5-gallon batch is a whole lot easier to stomach than trying to make a big giant vat of it and then figuring out you did it wrong. Um, Once I did for the salted caramel or orange cream and for our blackberry bourbon cream, once I, and my wife and I both, we both have to kind of make sure we're happy with it at the end of the day. But once we decided that, okay, this is what we want, it turns out that in our experience, it seems to scale up pretty good. So as long as you keep taking good notes of what your formulation is with that 5-gallon little batch you're making, once you scale that up, it stays pretty consistent. So if you're multiplying your batch by 10, just multiply everything by 10. And you may have to tweak it a little bit once you get up there to that level, but you will be pretty close.
Great. Now, Scott, tell us a little bit how you procure your dairy. Uh, how much of your alcohol base is your bourbon versus neutral spirit? And, how did you ultimately land on the recipe and scale it?
Yeah, it's as I was saying, we're a bourbon distillery first, and so this kind of rounds out our portfolio with the bourbon cream. And so you have to, there's several great Galloway is one. They're a good company that you can get the base from. There's Creamy Creations, there's Samsa. So there's a lot of companies out there you can get the base from. But it all gets down to, I mean, we're small, everybody's small. And so it comes down to MOQ. It comes down to, we're getting a tote at a time. So who's the LTL carrier and how much is that costing? Because so as a small business, yeah, there's a lot of choices of where you might get the base from, but that's not the total cost of ownership. There's a lot more that goes into that before you get that in. But we focus on the bourbon because this highlights our bourbon. And being a farm that grows corn to make bourbon, uh, we put, and as crazy as this sounds, we put 6-year single barrel aged bourbon in our bourbon cream. Now, that is completely nutty, but boy, is it good. And so, so sometimes you might think, as you're going into as other people are looking at doing this, you might think of, well, maybe, you use this, to use an inferior product. Well, we go from the other end. We do it to enhance the flavor of our bourbon. And so, and I can tell you, anybody who has a corporate board and financial wizards is laughing at us because we put 6-year bourbon in bourbon cream, because it is idiotic when you get down to dollars and cents, but it makes a really good product. And that's what we put the focus on to. We There's a lot of trial and error, as Tom talked about. We probably went through 18 months. So I have 2 partners. There's 3 couples that do everything with our distillery. Between us, we have 122 years of collective marriage. We've all been married about 40-ish years. So we have an expert panel of wives that do our tasting. And they went through, they did, boy, there was one of them who would have liked us to taste 5-gallon buckets at the time. She will be not named at this point, but we went through a lot of variation. So it's kind of, we wanted to get it right. So we spent a lot of time getting it right. And some of that is just all personal preference. It has nothing to do with formulation. It's just what you like, because as Tom is saying, I'm sure JD's been through the same thing. There are so many elixirs and witches brews and all the other stuff you can put in here. But there's a lot of different, and you don't know, hey, that enhancer works here, or this one doesn't work there. Yeah. And so we took time, and then the ladies went off and they went in the kitchen and they formulated it, and it worked out well. And I think our success is we enter this in a lot of local competitions and national competitions, and it turns out well.
Great. Yeah, no, especially like I mentioned earlier, you got the award at the Heartland Spirits, and that's a really big deal. So congratulations on that again. So now, JD, you're our dairy alternative guy. So I want to talk a little bit about working with a non-dairy ingredient like oats, and I would imagine that involves a lot of different levels of complexity. So tell us about the process of working with your ingredient partner, and how is the texture and mouthfeel different with oats than it would be with a dairy cream, and how do you make that approachable to consumers?
That's a great question. I'll say this. Chris and I, we always look for white water and white space when we're going to do anything or take any sort of venture on. And so, I sure as many folks on this call, when you go and you want to get a gallon of milk, all of a sudden you start seeing all these alternative milks. And then all of a sudden the milk aisle gets a little bit smaller because now you have pistachio, and now you have, oat milk, and you have almond milk, and you have all these alternative milks. And so we're just scratching our heads like, man, is this something that can be, kind of transferred over? The success of the alt milk category, can that be transferred over to spirits category? And we've been lucky enough to say, yeah, it can be. I'll tell you this: 70% of the world is lactose intolerant, including me. And I live in New Jersey, so we're right outside of Manhattan. So I love pizza. You put pizza in front of me, I'll hound it down. Pizza doesn't love me. I love pizza. So, there's a lot of folks that, even if they're not lactose intolerant, they're looking for, maybe something a little bit lighter, maybe something not as heavy as a proper cream. And you asked about how it compares. We tried everything. I mean, we went through it all. We went through almond. We went through pea proteins. We went through oat. We did all the alternative milks that are essentially out there, and we found that oat just naturally has that viscosity and that texture that you're wanting when you are drinking a milk oat milk liqueur or a cream liqueur in general. One thing that I think everybody on this call probably can assume, and you're right, it doesn't have as much fat as your proper dairy. Dairy, it's silky, it has that mouthfeel, it's delicious, and we wanted to match that as close as possible. And I believe that we did. But with our flavor profiles and everything, it is definitely a lighter alternative, not just with mouthfeel, but also in the ingredients that we're putting in as well. It's certainly less fat. It's a bit less sugar. We're very, very descriptive and intentional with how we're making our product. So yes, it is definitely. I don't want to say it's more complicated because, as everybody's going to discover, getting into the cream liqueurs is complicated. I would say there's different complications certainly when you're dealing with alternative milk, especially if you're trying to compete in a cream category. And it was really important to us that when you were trying our product, especially our bourbon cream, that you didn't feel like you were like drinking plants or drinking water. Like, who wants to buy that? Like, people are spending their hard-earned money on your product, and you don't want them to regret it. So, lots of reiterations. Like, we just did everything we could to make sure that that mouthfeel was comparable to dairy. And yeah, we think we did an all right job, and we're seeing the reorders. So no one's spitting it out yet. So we're excited about that.
Great, thanks. And
Yeah.
speaking of sort of complications, complexities, that sort of thing, what's the approval process like with TTB with products like these? I mean, obviously, the it's obviously they know Baileys, they know cream liqueurs in general, but once you start getting a little more creative, did anything sort of surprise you about that approval process versus working with them on something like a bourbon?
One thing that does make it easier is, of course, obviously you have to have a formula when you're doing one of these with TTB. But when you're working with, especially a reputable flavor manufacturer, along with the ingredients that you have received from them, and once you've come up with what your formula is for your product, they most of those ingredients, if not all, should have a previously approved TTB number where they have already ran it through TTB. TTB has approved that ingredient. So that way, when you are telling the TTB what your formula is, you can put that number in. It recognizes it. It says, okay, if that's what you're using, we've already approved that. There are some ingredients that don't require approval. And Scott, JD, you guys may have worked with ingredients that don't have that number. Maybe you've got some experience with that. But once you put that in for your formula, that makes it a whole lot easier, first of all, because it's pre-approved type stuff. One thing I learned from a TTB audit a couple years ago is when you put your formulation into TTB, you have the option of putting exactly what your formula is, which is what I did because I thought that's what you wanted. But you also have the option for a range. I highly recommend that you put in a range for all of your ingredients because when they send that off to for a lab analysis during a TTB audit, they're going to say, well, it turns out you weren't exactly 14.2%, you were 15.6. I'm like, I'm dumping stuff in a vat. And they say, well, that's what you said. So I thought, okay, well, I thought that I was doing the right thing. They said, why don't you go back and resubmit the formula, but make that a reasonable range of like a lot for all your ingredients. That way your ingredients are accurate, but you're not stuck to a very specific amount that it has to be in there. So that's a big, big tip I'll give you when you're putting your formulation in is give yourself the range option. Um, Other than that, it usually goes pretty well. Once you submit that formula, the approval normally comes fairly quickly. They'll look through it. Um, so yeah, working with TTB isn't too bad. Now with proofing, that's when it gets a little bit complicated. That's where people usually get scared with it. I highly recommend sending off what you've done before you do your first bottling that you're going to distribute. Send it off to a lab, either BDAS, which is who we use with Gary Spedding, and I know that Scott JD can recommend some other ones, but send it off to a lab, but you still want to test it at your place if you want to. Depends on how many batches you do. If you're like me and do lots of small batches, I can't afford to send it off to the lab for 60, 70, $80 a pop every time I do a batch. So there are videos on the TTB website on how they want you to check your proof for a liqueur. I do something similar, which they seem to be happy with when I got audited. I don't use the exact equipment they use, but I use a rotovape, a rotary evaporator, which is just a mini, tabletop still, basically. And it works beautifully for me. It's time consuming because it takes between 30 minutes to an hour to actually distill off that alcohol that you can then proof it like normal to make sure it's the same. And what a lot of people do, and my TTB auditors told me this as well, they were kind of surprised when I told them I actually do what I'm supposed to do and distill it. Because a lot of people think, well, look, if I put 30 proof alcohol into this vat, then when you evaporate it off, it should be 30 proof, right? Because that's what I put in it. And the thing is, no. And it has to do with volume. The volume of the sugars and the ingredients and all the solids that you have in a cream liqueur change the volume of a bottle of spirit. So even though it's 750 or whatever milliliter it is, your alcohol is most likely low. If all you did was just say, well, I want it to be 30 proof and I put 30 proof alcohol in it according to my formula, I'm good. That won't hold up according to TTB. So you do need to distill it back off right before you bottle it. You're also supposed to do it during bottling, which turns into a pain in the butt. If you want to stick to the actual rules of TTB, you must check it during the bottling process. So there is some more time consuming things that go into bottling a liqueur. But it's not difficult. It just adds a little more time to the process that you have to be aware of.
Yeah,
Let's
and I
talk.
can just add
Oh,
to that really quickly,
sure.
Tom. Just on this side of things, we were talking about flavors. Yes, using flavors that are pre-TTB approved is like a must. It'll save you so much pain, for sure. I think the one issue that we had was the TTB and the FDA don't seem to agree on some things, and some of our core, for our oat milk liqueur, for outrageous, we're really going after larger chains that also have grocery attached to them. And some of the largest chains there are definitely have regulations based on what brands and what ingredients are in those brands and what they can bring in and what they can't bring in. And what we found early on was some of the natural ingredients and things that were TTB approved that we didn't maybe know exactly how that particular flavor in that flavor house, because that's their Coca-Cola formula, was produced. But TTB said, yeah, it's all natural, all good. And then you look at the FDA, which some of these larger customers and retailers are looking at and abiding by, and they're saying, no, that's not all natural. So one thing that we had to do was go back and make sure that both of these government agencies are speaking the same language, and so that we're adhering to the TTB, but also to the FDA, so that we can do business and partner with some of these larger groups and better for you opportunities. So not that everybody's rushing to do a dairy free alt milk liqueur, but if that is what you're looking to do and you want to get into some of these more notable retailers, it is a really good idea to do a little bit more digging and due diligence on what those TTB approved flavors actually have in them to make sure that you can scale properly, if not just nationally, internationally as well. So that was one of the hurdles that we had early on, and our brand's only been around for 14 months right now. So, yeah.
JD, can your ingredient supplier help you with that FDA check?
Yeah, I think it's just really more about asking the question and us being kind of new to it. We were like, oh, cool, all natural, TTB approved, like let's let it rip. And then we find out that you kind of gotta, do a double check there, especially if a larger opportunity is looking at a different set of regulations. You just gotta yeah, double check your ingredients to make sure that if that's an end goal for you and that's important to your brand, that you're adhering to that.
All right. And Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add to this, or?
No, I think that's if you stick to the TTB approved, so that's a great place to start. There are some other things you don't need, the TTB seal of approval for there, but that's just minor type of things there too. It just makes it so much easier. And again, Tom, he probably thinks I'm crazy for putting a 6 year bourbon in. I think he's crazy for doing his micro distillation there for that. I simply send it off to a lab because it's way too much work for us.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I do, but I got to where, because I just make so many, I do kind of just in time production, being as small as I am. So I don't make giant vats. So next thing you know, I get an order in from a distributor. I need to hurry up, hustle, and actually create it from scratch. So I don't have time for that lab result to come back sometimes. And there's a lot of us that do it in that manner, just kind of as the order comes in or as I need it, I make it. So it became time to a money thing and a time thing for me. So I thought, I might as well just go ahead and learn to actually check this myself. And it turns out, again, it's not bad once you dial it in. It's actually a fairly simple process, and the equipment's cheap. I mean, because the Rotovape I use, I got it off Amazon for $500, and it works beautifully. It's just a simple piece of lab equipment, easy to learn how to use. It just takes a little bit of time, but once you get it dialed in and you're careful with how you do your ingredients going forward, and especially if you're consistent with your batch sizes, it ends up being cost effective pretty quickly.
Awesome. Now let's talk product consistency and shelf stability. These are really critical in this category. Uh, One key thing to be concerned with is the emulsion breaking and the ingredients separating. ABV, pH, and heat are three of the main elements that need to be adjusted to keep that from happening. So, JD, I know coffee in particular, from what I've talked to a bunch of people, like as far as ingredients go in these sorts of beverages, coffee can be really tricky ingredient to work with, given, its low pH, it's acidic. Um, did that or any of your other flavors require a great deal of adjustment?
Yeah, it did. Coffee is a wonderful flavor, and obviously everyone on this call probably knows or feels the moment that coffee's having right now, mainly also with the espresso martini. It's just very, very popular in our industry right now. Um, yes, to all those things. Everyone knows that coffee has a lower pH. Oats do have a bit of a lower pH than dairy, but we still run into very similar issues with emulsification, emulsifying, bouncing pH and proof. The good news I would say about this is, and Tom and Scott could definitely maybe talk a little bit more about the mechanics of actually blending. We are fortunate enough at Outrageous to work with some food scientists and suppliers that are able to help us monitor that to a T. Every single day, when we started Misunderstood Oat Nog, we actually let it sit every single day at 120 degrees to ensure that shelf life stability, everything was up to standards and up to quality. And once we got that 2+ year shelf life, we felt comfortable to take it to the next step and launch Outrageous. So to answer your question, we still to this day keep each and every bottle. We have bourbon cream, espresso, and coconut as our flavors for Outrageous, and we keep those at 120 degrees just to ensure that there's no separation, that there's nothing funky going on, that everything's quality and safe for consumption, and that's been great. But I will say, unlike Tom, who's just doing the Lord's work there and doing everything from A to Z, and Scott, who's growing the good stuff and putting 6 year old bourbon in there. By the way, I can't wait to try that, Scott. Sounds amazing. We do work with partners, and we do work with chemists, and we do work with food scientists to ensure that our product is stable. The coffee flavors, though, we do use extracts in there, and that has helped significantly with the separation. So we haven't had any separation for the last year, which has been awesome. But I mean, we had to even be aware of how much air was being pumped into to fill from the vat to the bottles, and if we had too much air, that could in the hose, that could cause separation. Also, oats inherently don't have as much protein, and so we also had to use soy in order to help with not only stick the alcohol with the oat milk to make the liqueur, but then also have the flavors like the coffee and add that extra protein to help everything stick together. So it was a process, but yeah, I would say that the coffee for sure is always a tricky one. But I know Tom can talk a little bit. I know he has some examples about separation, what things should look like and what things shouldn't look like. So
Um, Tom, do you want to take that? And we'll go back to Scott after.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just show you what it looks like. This is what our salted caramel should look like when it's on the shelf. Looks great. This is actually my collector bottles on my shelf. So this is ancient. This is probably 4 or 5 years old. Still looks fantastic over 4 or 5 years, no problem. This is one I made this summer. As you can tell, it shouldn't look like that. I now have a solid giant chicken nugget looking thing that's floating around in a brown liquid. It's not great. So that's what can happen on the shelf and what can happen if you're not watching what's going on. What I historically, we've been doing these for about 5 years now. Really haven't had any of these issues whatsoever. The first time I ever saw something that looked like this, a lady came into our distillery and said that she had bought one of these and something's happened to it. And she showed it to me. It looked just like this. Turns out she had forgotten she bought it, left it in the trunk of her car for 2.5 years. So it did this in the trunk. So what that tells you is this saying, even after you've done a great job, it still can't handle crazy, crazy temperatures on this because it will change the chemistry in that bottle. It'll do that. But we've never had any trouble till this year. And what happened in Kentucky this year is on the first day of summer, the temperature went to 100 degrees and it stayed there for about 2 months. We did not have a single break whatsoever, but we still had to produce. We still had to make product. So it made it very, very difficult without complete climate control in our bottling area. So we ended up bottling too hot. So here's what that caused. When we were doing it too hot, everything was, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh man, this is mixing well. Everything has blended together well. Well, it's kind of fooling you just because of the temperature. After it actually got into a bottle and went through filtration, went in a bottle, then you set it aside. It turns out that heat had already done its magic on the molecules and the proteins in that mix. It looked great when you put it in there, but then a couple days, a week or two later, you go look at it, and it has just turned into the swamp thing. It's just the nastiest stuff you ever saw. So we actually had to rework a lot of things that weren't quite to this level, but they had it was the curdled milk is what it was. And it didn't show itself during the bottling process. You had to let it cool back down. So I would recommend when you're doing the bottling, make sure that you're not doing it in extreme high temperatures. Another mistake I made was that I was putting alcohol that was a little bit too high proof in as well to do my blending along with the dairy base because you don't want to do that either. But the main thing was don't bottle too hot because it'll fool you. You think it's actually mixed great. It's not. Along with mixing, always be mixing your product. If you can actually have a vat or a tank that has a constant rotating blender in it, do it because it just keeps everything trying to gel together like it's supposed to. So mix it, mix it, mix it as much as you possibly can. Don't bottle too hot. And then the next thing is to keep this right here from happening. Since I'd already kind of made everything was kind of probably on that borderline of pH. Then we also had distributors that come pick up the cases and then they drive around all over creation with their delivery trucks and it's still 110-degree heat index outside. Then they go to their warehouse and probably stuck me in a corner that's not that great. Then it goes to a liquor store. Those liquor stores may not have the greatest spot where they're storing it either. So this is the first year ever that we actually got calls from retailers saying, "Hey, we opened up a case to put it on the shelf, and this is what we saw." We got lucky, and there weren't that many. But that's the thing is that you want to make sure you do everything right in your place. It still can't be exposed to high heat during the process. And one thing you can do to try to avoid some of that is either having a frosted bottle, a darker bottle, a UV protective covering on it like JD uses. because UV can also do this. And we saw that as well. Um, we had actually, during one of those batches that I made, where it was kind of, I bottled it a bit too hot, looked good. So I kept my eye on it, kind of like what JD does, puts it at 120, lets it sit. I wasn't trying to keep it at 120, but I did have a section of it that was in daylight for about 3 hours a day with a sunbeam going on it. And it turns out that that exact row where that sun was coming through the window and hitting it, all of them in that row solidified, and the rest of them looked just fine. So you want to make sure that your pH is in that neutral zone. You use those with, if you're doing it, you do it with test strips or whatever you want to use, um, to make sure you're in a good spot with it, and then just try not to let it get any hotter than it has to, because that's what has caused us issues for the first time ever this year.
All
Yeah,
right,
I'll
so we
add on to that what Tom was talking about. So you got to keep mixing this stuff. You've got to keep moving that stuff around. So we had a batch. So our first one, we're in there stirring it around, and we have like a canoe paddle or something in there, and we at that point I realized we don't have any teenage sons anymore, and so this is way too much work. So on batch two, we bought a mixer. Yeah, that was well worth the time. You that constant mixing and churning, you need to keep doing that because that's just the process.
and Scott, what would you say we've been talking about heat and we've been talking about pH a bit, but ABV, what's the sweet spot for ABV, to ensure stability and non-emulsion breaking?
It's we didn't look at the ABV as much for the breaking in there. It's more about the mouthfeel, the taste. And that, we start off like, you look what's out in the market. Now, everything's around 30 proof. Okay. So that's a good starting point. So we tried some more than that. We tried some less than that. And, through our expert tasting team, meaning our wives, 30 proof kind of worked. And again, going back to, we make bourbon. We're not, we're not about cream liqueurs. I mean, this is one thing we have, but mainly what we have is bourbon. So we like highlighting the taste of our bourbon. So we wanted that to come out, and we don't have a column still. I mean, we have we're a hybrid still. So it's a pot still with a 3-foot deflator on it. So it's when you when you do a single batch at a time, you get a pretty creamy mouthfeel to begin with. I mean, it's not coming off a column. That's a different mouthfeel. And so we were trying, and you lose a lot in translation. I understand it once you mix it with the cream liqueur, but we're still trying to highlight our bourbon in there. And we have tried. We did toy with using an MGP style type of thing, bringing that in, and something off a column. It just didn't have the same flavor and taste that we were looking for. So ABV wasn't an endpoint for us. We kind of started that as part of the formulation. I don't know what JD and Tom looked at.
Yeah,
Any
mine's
thoughts on
exactly the same.
ABV?
I looked to see what everybody else was doing and thought, okay, some of those companies, I thought they have a lot more experience and money than me. So they seem to think 30 is good. So I'm going to start there. But also, it wasn't just that. That's where you started at. But I thought, okay, the mouthfeel is good at this level. And also turns out that is in a good ABV to where you're not going to be actually causing issues with your emulsion. You're in a good range to where it's happy in that range of alcohol, so it's not constantly trying to separate it. But also, it's way high enough that you can also leave it on the shelf, don't have to worry about it. Because that's the two things you want to keep in mind with your alcohol. So, yeah, other people before we came along figured out that 30 proof is good. That's why that's about what everything is. So, yeah, don't mess with what works is kind of how I went with
Yeah,
that one.
I got news for you. I'm sure Diageo spent a lot of money, yeah, determining that 30 proof is good. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna outsmart Diageo. They're not losing market share to me. I'm just taking table scraps from them.
We went a little bit of a lighter approach. I mean, just given what our ingredients, our base ingredients we were using with the oats, we actually like like everyone else said, we started with a little bit of a higher proof, and we found that the bourbon and the alcohol was just coming off a little bit too strong. So we ended up sticking with 24, or excuse me, 28 proof, 14% ABV. So just a couple notches down, but it really played nicely with our flavors and our base. And just for folks that want a bit of a lighter experience, it worked really well for us.
Great. Now let's talk a little bit about the market itself. I kind of want to hear what each of your pitches was to consumers, what the reaction from consumers has been, and anything that surprised you about that. I mean, I know Tom, you mentioned that I believe you said the salted caramel was probably your biggest seller among those. So tell me, how's the response been? What's been your reaction to that response? What surprised you about it? And generally, how are you selling this to people? Like, what's your sales pitch?
Sure. So it actually ends up pretty easy. If I can get it to their lips, it sells. That's pretty much how these cream liqueurs work. If you can get it on their lips, that's your selling point. So out of our gift shop, it's a no-brainer. We have no issue selling it in our gift shop. If we go do tastings, it's no problem. We're selling bottles. They're walking out of there with it. When you're not there in the retail store and you're competing with the rest of them, then it's like every other product that we all sell, right? Is how do I compare with that? Also, how do I make sure I get my margin down? Because being craft, you're looking at it going, oof, I don't know if I can sell my cream liqueurs as low as they do. We're starting to dial it in now, but it's taken a while. But basically, it's an easy selling point. The fun thing we have is when people come in to our distillery that are with friends and they don't drink bourbon, they don't like anything like that. But we're like, well, but we have this. It's only 30 proof. It's nothing. Why don't you try it? We put it in our coffee every morning. Why don't you give it a shot? And they'll try it. Next thing you know, there goes bottles out the door. It's just get it on their lips. We have a lot of people come in that they're bourbon connoisseurs where I'm not even want to try that in the tasting. You could just forget about it. I just want your bourbons and hazmat if you got it. We're like, yes, of course, burly fella, but try it, see what you think. And it's amazing how they'll look at us as they try and go, well, I guess I better take this home to my wife and my sister. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, you go ahead and take them some with you. And it turns out that it really does come down to that. Get it on their lips. If you make some of this product, go do tastings. I can promise you, you will move those bottles. People love it.
All right, JD, same questions for you.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think it's hard to dislike creams. There's just something about them. There's something nostalgic about it, especially with some of the more common flavors, the bourbon creams, the salted caramels, and things like that. I mean, I think for us, our big differentiator, of course, being dairy free, we wanted to really create, our whole thing is innovation with intention. So we were looking at what can we do to break cream out of its bottle and not just look at bumps in Q4 for sales? Like, we're not creating this whole brand just so we can sell a lot during OND. We're creating this brand so that we can be relevant everywhere from the cabana and the beach bar to, you know, Tom's customers are coming home and they just want to pour and hang out, relax after a day of work. So that's kind of how we picked like our flavors and nostalgia. We just talked about at lengths about espresso and coffee and what that's doing. I mean, the espresso martini is absolutely crushing. And so a lot of folks on here probably realize that if they're not playing or offering a coffee type of deal, they might be losing out on some sales. So we really leaned into that, and that has done well, especially with those consumers that are looking for maybe something already made, like an RTD, but they like espresso martinis that are creamier. So that does really well. But my favorite that we've made is coconut. We use real coconut paste from the Philippines, which we emulsify in our liqueur, and that has been just incredible and extremely relevant for a lot of folks because not only we, you know, a little bit of a lighter offering, dairy free, but also it kind of completes our whole mission to break the cream liqueur out of its bottle and enjoy it during the summertime. Not saying at all there's plenty of dairy products that are summer focused, but for us, we're just like, hey, you want something a little bit lighter, a little bit more accessible. Let's do the coconut, and that has proven to be extremely successful for us. So I guess the point being, um, play with the flavors, but also like use some data and see, like, you can of course imitate, but look around you. Like, the data doesn't lie in real life. Like pistachio and Dubai chocolate, those are flavors that are definitely going to be on the rise, and it's not just a trend. So look into that. Like coffee, there's still room to play with the coffee, so go after that. But when I see some of the mango flavors and the more summer stuff, like, think about the occasion, think about the consumer. I saw a couple folks write some questions about RTDs, and I responded, I don't have any really great answers for the RTDs because I'm literally producing them on Thursday. We're testing them out. So I'll come back and let everybody know how that goes. But we're going to be bottling our Sunny Colada and our Espresso Martini, bottling canning. So I'll let you all know how that goes. But yeah, just like relevance and really focus on the occasion. Yes, it's great that you love it, but if we're going to be making sales, like, I don't really care if the store owner doesn't like coconut. I care about if his customers like coconut, and then just go after the customers. So, at the end of the day, that's who's buying it. Like I said, people are spending the hard earned money on your product. So you want to do it right and hopefully, capture them in the moment, in the right occasion.
All right, Scott, tell us about the role that Maryland Bourbon Cream plays in your overall portfolio. Is it helping sell your bourbon? Is your bourbon helping sell the bourbon cream? And what about it seems to be resonating most with your consumers?
Well, I just think it rounds out our whole portfolio because we're a bourbon house, but we have a tasting room, and so we have people come in, and it's a couple. It didn't matter if it's a man, woman, or woman, man. One likes bourbon, and one maybe not. Maybe one's a wine drinker or something like that. And it's they we got bourbon cream to appeal for the non-bourbon drinker. And so, because that's my great line. People go, oh, I don't drink bourbon. I go, we made something for you. So and it's getting back to what Tom says. You let it, once they try it, then their eyes light up. You can see it on their face when it goes, because when you get a craft product that's made in small batches, it just tastes different. It's like the difference between your mother's cookies and getting something from Keebler. Yeah, they're good, but man, your mom's cookies, that's a lot better, and you can taste the difference. So our bourbon cream has been a huge boon to us because it's rounded out our portfolio. So now I'll call it a full service enterprise now, because we cater to, not just bourbon people there too. So actually bourbon cream's our number 2 product now. We are not looking to expand. I mean, I have zero desire to get more cream products. I mean, and we just focus on this and moving there because our customers come to us, because the question I get is, hey, how do I take this? I said, well, on ice or this. And I said, hey, I'll give you the first 30 ways, because our customers give us all sorts of ideas. I mean, there is, coffee and hot chocolate. Those are the simple things. People make French toast with this. They make fudge with it. They put it, they go to Wendy's and put it in a Frosty. They go, we have cookie recipes with our bourbon cream. It's the wackiest thing I've ever seen. It's the great equalizer for people that don't drink bourbon. And so, who don't like, 90 proof straight bourbon. That scares a lot of people. And so this just brings them into the tent. So it really has increased our customer acquisition here. And as Thomas said, people come in, our most popular sale is one bottle of bourbon, one bottle of bourbon cream together. That's the most common sale in our distillery.
Nice. So you know, people like trying things in cocktails. It's one of the ways to really drive trial. So I want to get from each of you a cocktail recommendation based on your products. So, Scott, what's yours?
It's easy. We just won the Maryland State Cocktail Competition for the whatever the Maryland grown thing there. It's our we call it a Maryland 400 cocktail because Maryland's about to be 400 here pretty soon. Going back to Thomas Bard and Bardstown in Kentucky when we lost Basil Hayden to Kentucky. But the it's we take our bourbon cream, a vanilla vodka. My wife makes a killer brown sugar simple syrup, and then we put in a half part. So it's one part each of those, and then a half a part uh, espresso. And now I tell you what, you got to be careful in that mixing if you're making batches, because you want to talk about a P. That is a wide pH birthing there. You have to be, yeah, you have to when you mix those, you have to be very careful, or
Mm.
that will break. And so you get those, and we have a local bar here in town, coffee house, social lounge here. They make this in the winter, they make it in the summer, and they make it in an icy machine. And they can't keep enough in the icy machine to keep them frozen because it's just delicious. So it's kind of a year-round kind of cocktail there.
Great.
It's
Tom.
basically a take on an espresso martini, if you will.
Tom, your
Yeah,
cocktail.
so so we keep ours fairly simple. With our salted caramel, you can make a white Russian. With our blackberry bourbon cream, same thing, but you call it a black Russian. And then for our orange cream liqueur, which tastes like a dreamsicle, that one and the salted caramel both added to some root beer, and it's just like a summer float.
Oh, damn.
It's just, I mean, we've got some other more complicated cocktails made out of it, but those are the ones that as soon as we say, just go home, add it to some root beer, and they just go say, that makes sense to me. They're going to just grabbing, they're saying, I need a case. Let's go. Um, that's something else I like with these is that you can have complicated cocktails. You can also have extremely simple ones. It's not a hard sell when people are saying, what can I put this in? Because they're already looking at it going, I'm just going to drink that straight. I just don't want to tell them. That's what they're thinking. So, yeah, we keep ours simple, but yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Great. JD.
Well, I love it. So I kind of alluded to this before. Our Sunny Colada is our favorite, and not just a personal favorite, but also with our accounts. I mean, Scott mentioned frozen machines. That is something certainly that has been a friend to the Sunny Colada, which is just one part of the outrageous coconut here, and then one part of just pineapple juice. So it's lower ABV. You're not adding like a ton of other things to it while you can. I mean, we play great with tequilas and bourbons and other things, but at the end of the day, if you just want to do one and one, it's absolutely delicious. It's super light, and we went through just north of 200 cases in 3 months with an account on the Jersey Shore. So we were really, really happy with that, and to explore that. Outrageous espresso, as everyone guessed, the espresso martinis. We definitely been getting in. Everyone thinks they make the best espresso martini, which I'm sure they do. So our whole tactic to get on menus was make it dairy free, for like $1 or whatever more, and that's been really success for us. And Tom, I hear you on the dirty sodas, brother. Our bourbon cream. We're actually the world's first dairy-free bourbon cream right there, and we throw that in a little Dr. Pepper, and garnish with a lime, and you're good to go. So we're very simple. It's funny because when we started Misunderstood and we came out with the oat nog, we were like, oh, we're gonna do all these ingredients, and it's really just like, especially with after COVID and pandemic, people just want more simple stuff, and so we kind of leaned into that. But with our oat nog, which is under the Misunderstood label, we add that with our ginger spice whiskey, and that's a ginger snap, and that's like Christmas in a glass all day. So a lot of fun to be had, and I'm sure there's more. Scott, you're gonna have to send me some of your wife's simple syrup and maybe some cookies because We got to try that, man. It sounds delicious. My mom also, I thought nothing tasted like my mom's cookies, and then I just realized that it was just Toll House and broke a little piece in my heart. But anyway, there you go.
All right. I saw most of the questions had been answered in the Q&A box, so there is one more. Do any of you guys have a service for formulating a recipe for a mudslide mix?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do any of you guys have a service for formulating a recipe for a mudslide mix?
To like actually make like a product that you're ready to sell, or like something for the on premise?
Um, Good
Oh, is that a
question.
question? Oh, it's a question.
It's a question
Oh,
Nelson, if you're
sorry. I
there,
thought
you
you
want to
were
clarify?
asking. Sorry.
Oh, ready to sell, he wrote.
Hey, isn't
Oh,
that something that Galloway would do? One thing, I mean, like if you go to the bit, you go to the, I did not that. I mean, I thank Galloway for sponsoring this, but I'm not pushing them. But them or Creamy Creations or Sasma, all those houses they have chemists on site that will come up with that other flavor you want. I think is that what he's asking?
yeah,
It
absolutely.
is.
Yeah, I would just reach out to like those two companies that Scott mentioned. That's certainly what we did. We spoke with everyone, actually. And everybody has formulation services and things like that. The one thing I would caution, though, for everyone, especially if you're looking to scale, is usually those houses do not allow you to own your formulation. So it's important to, look at, the parameters of what you're trying to do for like a mudslide, for example. So if you don't care about that, that could be a very easy thing for you to do. But if you do care about owning your formulation, it's probably best to, I think been some great companies that Tom and Scott have mentioned, like Mother Murphy's. I know there's Flavorman out there. Virginia Dare is another one. There's a lot. And all of those folks are, the chances are high that they've already worked with Galloway or Creamy or whatever. So, and then we talked about the TTB approved flavors, everything. These guys are experts, so they will tell you if they know how to do something, but they also have the professionalism to say, no, we don't know. So I would just start there, and happy to connect folks, if they're wanting to start a new product, and help how I can.
And Jeff, I see one more question about filtration, real quick. I use stainless steel filters. Whenever I do my cream liqueurs, I still do them on a basic Enomatic, which people use it at home for wines. I've got a single bottler and also a four-head bottler. So I get the stainless steel filters that go in that. I've got a 50 micron and a 10 micron. The 50 micron seems to do pretty well, especially if I've done everything else right. If I feel like I'm maybe doing things a little bit hotter than normal, which basically if I've got sweat on my brow, which is you try to avoid when you're bottling this stuff, I may go down to the 10 just to make sure I'm really trying to get some extra stuff out of it. But stainless steel goes well because you'll go through paper filters like crazy because they don't rewash very well. So I use stainless steel on that. And then the next question I saw about the pH. I usually stick between about a 6.5 to 7 is kind of whenever I check it. Like I said, you just check it with essential pull strips, just to see kind of what it's showing you. You can also use a pH meter and everything else, but 6.5, 7, closer to 7 seems to be about what I go for. I normally don't have to check it very often because the way my mixes go, as long as you're doing everything else where you're keeping the temperature below sweating while you're bottling and keeping everything mixed up pretty well. pH normally doesn't get to be a bad issue, but it's good to be ready to check it and make sure.
Yeah, and
All
the other
right.
thing when they're getting to what you're talking about, Tom, is it's when you're working with dairy, man, it's got to be clean. I mean, this is the bourbon is a little bit more. I mean, not that we run anything that's dirty, anything, but boy, you have to steam clean this stuff out, and especially afterwards, you got to clean out. So it's a you have to make this stuff. Starting out with a clean process is extremely important, and exactly like you're saying, Tom, getting a neutral pH is about where you're going. It's neutral 7, so close enough to that. It's not always exactly there, but it's pretty close to it.
All right, I think we're just about ready to wrap things up. But before we go, I'd like to once again thank our very generous sponsor, Galloway Company. Remember to find out more at gallowaycompany.com. And I invite everyone to check out the latest issue of Craft Spirits Magazine. The January-February issue includes a feature on this very topic with insights from some of the folks who are on the program today. Head to craftspiritsmag.com to get your free digital copy or subscription. Also, coming up, want to remind everyone 2026 ACSA Convention and Expo, Sacramento, California, April 17th and 18th. Register at AmericanCraftSpirits.org. And also, we're still accepting entries for the 2026 Craft Spirits Packaging Awards. You can screenshot that link there to enter. You don't need to submit any physical products, just good quality photos. And last but not least, I'd love to thank Tom, JD, and Scott for sharing their insights today. And I'd like to thank, of course, all of you in the audience for attending. Have an amazing rest of your day.